All right, man, peace. So Kevin Durant, the star forward of the Golden State Warriors, recently sat down and had an interview with the San Jose Mercury News, in which he decided to speak on a myriad of topics, one of them being race. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Kevin Durant's much criticized move from OKC to Golden State has also been a spiritual journey for the Finals MVP. He's become very outspoken on loyalty in the NBA, on politics, and now he's talking to the San Jose Mercury News about how basketball helped him avoid systematic oppression.
You know, before Molly continues, I just wanted to chime in on her statement that he's on a spiritual journey. I'm pretty sure that those are her words, because in the minds of most women, a spiritual journey means you having the ability to, quote unquote, speak your opinionated mind. Not to speak according to facts, but to speak your opinionated mind. Please remember, and it's not to digress, the woman is an agent of chaos, and she mistakes having the ability to speak her opinion with being spiritual and going on a spiritual journey. This is where you get the genesis of females thinking that they can preach the Bible and other things of that nature. Okay? It's based totally on their opinion. Now, in regards to her statement that Kevin Durant was speaking about loyalty in the NBA, let's be for real. For all intents and purposes, his version of speaking on loyalty in the NBA was creating a fake Twitter account so that he could put forth his true feelings on his former franchise, the OKC Thunder, in which he revealed that he didn't like the coach and that he felt like all the other players on the team were pretty much bums. So I don't really think that Kevin Durant is somebody who has spoken on loyalty in the NBA. I think that he pretty much has become the poster boy for what disloyalty in the NBA is, and I'm not saying that I agree with that. But no, he has not really spoken on loyalty or the lack thereof in the NBA. He's just put forth his own account through a fake Twitter account.
Quote, I didn't have it as rough as some do as far as it comes to social or systematic oppression or any social issues. They didn't really apply to me because I could put a ball in a basket. Just me saying that kind of woke me up a little bit, like, damn, that's all I'm good for.
Look, you know, as you get older as a man, as you mature, and Kevin Durant's pushing 30, he's damn near 30. So, of course, some of his maturation is delayed or has been retarded by the fact that he has been raised in that bubble of AAU basketball and college basketball in the NBA. And also he was raised by a single mother. So when you're raised in a single mother household, it does take a longer time for a man to reach a certain level of perceptual abilities. But you can see that he's still not there yet. Because as a man, you'll never ask a question of, damn, that's all I'm good for. As a man, you'll never ask that question to anybody because you'll know what you're good for because you'll tell yourself what you're good for. Right? Your worth is going to be provided by yourself. It's not going to be provided by anybody else's validation. So that hypothetical question really reveals that Kevin Durant, being woke and being a liberal black, is truly concerned about how he's perceived by the quote unquote majority, that being Caucasians. Those are the only people who ask questions like, damn, that's all I'm good for. When I say those, I'm talking about so-called pro-blacks and liberal blacks who are looking to be justified and validated by Caucasians. A real man does never ask anybody what they're good for. They already know.
Like, if I wasn't a basketball player, what kind of man would they look at me as? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. You're worried about how you're perceived by the masses at large, and you're caught up in the Twitter rabbit hole. You're caught up in the pro-black internet revolutionary rabbit hole, where you try to act as if you're standing up and you're being rebellious and you're confronting racism, when in reality you just want a hug. I mean, let's be for real, bro. That's what that quote reads to me as. Why would you ask somebody else what you're good for or how they look at you if unless you're truly concerned about how they look at you? You need them to validate you.
Stephen A., your reaction?
Well, he's absolutely right. We appreciate Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and others who have the courage and are socially conscientious enough to speak out on issues such as this. And to be quite honest with you, while I applaud them, I also want to say it's really no excuse for them not to. when you've made hundreds of millions of dollars and you're set not just for the rest of your life, but for generations. If you don't have the courage to speak up at that particular moment in time, when in God's name will you?
Right, but what difference does it make to speak up when you have no plan? What difference does it make to speak up when your only focus is still trying to seek the validation of those that you're speaking up allegedly against, but really towards, so that you can garner their attention and their approval? This is my issue with so-called pro-blacks, and this is my issue with a lot of the fake narratives that have been created, particularly in the last 2 years, in regards to the rise of the woke athlete. What really is their end game? When you really listen to most of these liberal black athletes, these woke athletes, their real end game really seems to be that they're pawns of the corporations. This is why they don shirts that say equality. Equality for who and with who? Who are you trying to be equal to? Because when you say that you want to be equal to the Caucasian, that means that in your mind, they're above you. You know, I really don't understand what the overall process is going to be for them to achieve that so-called equality. Most people who have a strong culture and who really have a strong belief in themselves and their people, they want to have their own. They're not striving to be viewed as equal, quote unquote, with anybody else.
Everybody hasn't been willing to do that. Everybody is a bit different, and we understand that. But we applaud them for their willingness to do it. And let's get into the weeds of what he is speaking to. He talked about bouncing a basketball and his greatness of playing the game of basketball, and that's why he's privileged. So he asked the question, is that all I'm good for? What America won't admit, but must at one point in time, is the answer would have been an emphatic yes.
No, sir. No, sir. Never at any time should the black man ever ask, quote unquote, America what he's good for. You have to look in the mirror and you have to ask yourself, what am I good for? And that's the only thing that matters. Whether it's 1920, 1930, 1950, 1990, or the 2010s that we're in now. Never at any point is it a relevant or pertinent question for a black man to ask somebody else, or America at large, or Caucasians, what am I good for? When you have to ask somebody else what you're good for, you've already failed as a human being. Okay? Never in life should you be asking someone else what you're good for. You have to ask yourself what you're good for. That's it. That's all that matters. Because by the time you're being validated by someone else, you're no longer a man. At best, you're a child. Really, you're a slave.
Until you prove otherwise. See, Kevin Durant is not just great because Kevin Durant is a basketball player. And he's a great basketball player. Kevin Durant is great is because he's going about the business of parlaying that success on the basketball court to something far more expansive beyond the court of play, which is what LeBron James has done, Kobe Bryant has done, Shaquille O'Neal has done, and Magic Johnson, of course, and various others. And so it's a lesson to be peeled from all of that. The opportunities are going to come in a variety of forms and fashions. But ultimately, what you do with it matters. What you do with it determines your worth. Because even in the process of being treated well and with adulation pouring down upon you from everywhere, ultimately that ride ends. And then it transitions from adulation to respect. And the respect emanates from what you've done with the opportunities you were blessed with.
Well,
not just being adulation.
The main respect that you have to have in life is self-respect. All right. And Stephen A., he's made some relatively valid points, but the main respect that you have to have in life is self-respect, because that's going to dictate your conduct. When you have respect for yourself, that's going to determine your actions. It's going to determine how you treat yourself. People are going to treat you how you treat yourself. So you can't be caught up in adulation or the respect of others, because depending on your environment, you'll get respect based off of actions that might not lead to self-respect. Depending on the environment that you're in, you may get respect for being violent. Does that mean that that's a good, that's a proper way to express yourself through violence, wanton violence? I'm not talking about self-defense. I'm talking about you may be in an environment where people respect you if you rob people or if you sell drugs. You can't ever get off on trying to strive for the respect of others. The main thing that you got to have in your life, man, is self-respect. And this is why I say I make these, my channel is geared towards the so-called black man. Because the so-called black man is the recipient of so many various messages to try to implement a method of thinking in the black man's mind to make him think that the only thing that matters in his life is how other people think about him. And when we talk about oppression, the main form of oppression that the so-called black man has to overcome is self-oppression. Self-oppression is when you doubt yourself to the point where you cannot believe that you can achieve anything. That's the only oppression that truly matters. Now, are we living in a society where there are forces that are trying to stop the so-called black man from achieving things? Of course. But you can't be concerned about those type of things until you can get over your own self-oppression. And if Kevin Durant was not a great basketball player, the main oppression that he would have to be concerned with, he'd have to be concerned with being oppressed by his own people. Because our people have such a low self-esteem. They have such a poor outlook for themselves because of their lack of knowledge of a culture. They spend so much time trying to stop each other from doing well and from having a proper outlook and aspirations for themselves. These are the things that our people should be concerned with, not whether or not the Caucasian man and woman likes them or what they're valued for by the Caucasian man and woman. To hell with them, because they're certainly not concerned about what you think at all. So the fact that you're always concerned about what you're good for in regards to them will always put you in a slave role to them. And it's very, very, very important that our people, particularly so-called black men, understand that.
Congratulated for having those opportunities and you're in the public eye at that particular moment in time. The only other thing that I would like to say is that as tough as he explains it for himself, for the African-American athlete and beyond, there are times when I wish those same African-American athletes would look at folks in other professions being black. It could be from somebody in a doctor's office.
I agree with that. Because the fact that Kevin Durant basically said, if I wasn't a basketball player, I'd be nobody. That's his way of saying that in his view, his only way, quote unquote, out was being a basketball player. And that is his way of saying that he does not value his brain and his mind. The only way that he could achieve any form of success was through his physicality and through expressing himself physically through his body. And, I'll probably be doing a video on that in the future in regards to the so-called black brain. These are sentiments that are normally lambasted in mainstream society in regards to the so-called black man and his brain. They always want the so-called black man to not value himself for his mental acuity or his mental ability. It's all about physical. That's why they always accentuate things. People always talk about how women are sexualized in America. The most sexualized entity in America is the so-called black man. He's the person who people always harp on his physical, whether it be his body or his penis or whatever. It's always on the so-called black man. The black man is far, far, far more valued and appraised for his physique and his physical abilities than any other demographic, much more than women. Because the woman right now could be a fat hoe, and everybody will tell her that it's okay that you're a fat hoe. But the so-called black man, he has to have some type of physical value, or they're going to try to make him think that he has no value.
It could be somebody on Wall Street. It could be somebody sitting in this chair. Because when you're in the public eye and everybody's coming at you, you have a job to do. You got to call it like you see it. But as you can attest to, Max, and you, Molly, because y'all see me on my phone all the time and you know the kind of work that I do. Every single day, myself, the Michael Wilbons, the J.A. Adondes, the Bill Rodens, the Kevin Blackerstones, and the list goes on and on and on. There are African Americans that are in positions to disseminate information every single day. And sometimes we got to tell a story, and sometimes it's very flattering, and sometimes it's not. But the bigger quest is to position yourself on behalf of yourself, your company, and more importantly, your community, to be in a position to disseminate information that benefits the collective whole. And sometimes these very athletes that lament how they're viewed upon don't realize they view folks like us and others the same way they lament being viewed themselves.
I agree with that. And that's a great point by Stephen A. And I give Stephen A credit for making that point. Kevin Durant is going on about how he's viewed only as an athlete. But Stephen A's point is that many black athletes will look at a so-called black media member with less esteem than they would a Caucasian media member. So that definitely is a valid point. That's why I made the statement that I made about self-oppression. You know, people oppress themselves all the time. It's just a lack of belief in your own ability to lead. And again, this is why it resonates in people not giving the so-called black man any form of serious consideration in leadership positions, because you have to view yourself as a leader before anybody else can view you as a leader. And that goes into decision making, that goes into discernment, that goes into discipline and everything else. And when I say a leader, I'm not talking about necessarily at a job where, you know, you don't get the position as a supervisor. I'm just talking about in the household. The reason why many of these women do not view you as a leader is because you're not exhibiting male traits. The main one being belief in yourself, the ability to make proper decisions. The woman in her spirit knows that she's a child. She's waiting for you to figure it out and lead her. And if she's not willing to accept your leadership, then she must go. Period. You can't be in a relationship with a woman where she does not accept your leadership. That's confusion. You cannot have two bulls in a pen. Okay? You have one bull in a pen and he leads all the other cows. So the main oppression that the so-called black man goes through is self-oppression. And when the so-called black man gets over that self-oppression, then you'll find that the other forms of oppression that are in place can easily be eradicated. Because even, you know, the main part of being a so-called slave is that you want to be a slave because of your decision making. And certain people might get upset with that. Oh, you trying to make excuses for white people? Bro, look, at the end of the day, here's what I know about so-called pro-blacks. You don't hate the white man, because if you hated the white man, you would have started the race war. If you hated the white man, you would have left America and you would have went to one of those countries in the quote unquote motherland that you talk about so much. So you don't hate the white man, nigga. You're just another dude talking shit or another woman talking shit on the internet. Okay? And you don't have a ruling class mentality. And that's the main problem that our people have. They do not have ruling class mentality.
They don't get that from time to time, and sometimes I wish they did.
You invert the racist idea of the white man's burden. This is the black man's burden, right? We discussed it earlier in the show.
Yes, and you would know a lot about the white man's burden, Max Kellerman, because being a liberal Caucasian Jew, liberal Caucasian white man yourself, you embody the modern day manifestation of the white man's burden, because you believe that you should be able to tell the liberal black how to think. And you're very successful in that strategy. Most liberal blacks just puppet and parrot what the liberal Caucasian tells them to think and what they should say, and whatever strategies they should use to achieve their goals and their aims.
In the show, because you always feel that you can't just behave as an individual, but you're representing a larger group, which has been a persecuted minority. Kevin Durant, you know what this got me thinking of, Stephen A? Do the Right Thing, where Mookie, you know, Spike Lee's character, who directed the film, obviously, his opus, really, I think, still.
Well, Spike Lee has done a lot of great films. Do the Right Thing is a good film, is a great film. I don't know if that was his opus, but you know, that's another conversation for another day. You know, but I've always been a huge advocate for He Got Game, but I'll probably be covering that film in another video. But He Got Game, Clockers, Malcolm X, of course, another great movie. Jungle Fever, another great movie. Spike had his run, but Spike is a pawn, but that's a whole nother issue. I'll be covering that in another video.
Is talking to John Turturro's character in the pizza shop, and John Turturro's playing a racist character.
Yes.
And Mookie says, I don't understand you. Who's your favorite basketball player? Magic Johnson. Who's your favorite actor? Eddie Murphy. Who's your favorite
Not black.
Prince. And he's like, well, Bruce, he tries to argue for Bruce Springsteen, but he's Prince. You remember that scene, Bruce, right? He says the point is they're all black, and yet you're racist. He goes, no, they're different. They're different. And Kevin Durant has now experienced this. He's different somehow, and realizes now that he is awakening to this. It's life is a journey. It's a process.
Yeah, it's kind of the Moses mentality. When Moses was accepted by and raised by the elite of Kemet, and he understood that he was not of that origin, and then he started to feel a certain kinship with his own. But let me say this quickly. One of the main reasons why the Caucasian will make those type of statements in regards to those successful so-called black people being different, what they're really saying is that those successful so-called black people did not look to us for validation. They went out there and they had a goal, they had a talent, and they perfected that talent. See, they look at so-called black people with higher esteem than many of our people look at themselves. And they say, damn, you people have all this talent, but you have no belief in yourself. You have no ability to lead yourselves partly because of what has been done to us over the course of a certain period of time through getting conquered in history, at the latter part of the, I won't say the Middle Ages, but going into the 1700s, what you call the Enlightenment period, 1600s, 1700s. But that's a whole nother video for another day. Point being is this: the Caucasian makes a differentiation between the average so-called black and the affluent black, and that they recognize that an affluent or successful so-called black person had a goal for themselves and they achieved that goal. So that automatically will always give someone respect. Point being is this: they don't want you to look to them for acceptance. That's really what they're saying. They're waiting for the so-called black man. Just like I stated that the so-called black woman is waiting. They're waiting for you to decide that you're no longer going to be relegated to a low-level position under them by your own seeking. You seek to be relegated to a lower position under them by constantly seeking out their validation and their love and their acceptance. Every successful so-called black person that you'll see, what they oftentimes have in common is that they had a goal and they achieved that goal incrementally, however long it took. They went about trying to achieve it. And some of them had to, quote unquote, sell out. Some of them had to do certain things. But what they all had in common was that they had a goal. Now, the point being is that when you have a vision for yourself, that you don't sell yourself short and that you don't sell yourself out. But once you reach that pinnacle, whatever it is, you'll find that you have much greater satisfaction that you achieved it on your own, and you didn't ask anybody for validation. You didn't ask them for credibility. Now, in regards to athletics, the so-called black man has always risen through athletics in empires where he was a vassal. Even in Rome, quiet as kept, the vast majority of the gladiators were black. And that's why oftentimes when you watch movies about gladiators, they'll always have a black gladiator in there. They'll throw one or two of them in there, if you notice, because they know that in history, most of the gladiators were black. Just like today, most of your professional athletes in America are black, so-called black. All right. In the three major sports, black athletes probably make up about 60% of the rosters of these various teams in the three major sports. But the black man only makes up 6% of the U.S. population, allegedly. So that shows you that the so-called black man is, that is a field that he is extremely successful at. Same way in the ancient world. Most of the great gladiators were black. Spartacus was a black man. Quiet as kept. That's another video for another day. Point being is this, to Max Kellerman's attempt at a point or his point, the reason why most Caucasians view successful blacks as being different from regular blacks is because they actually, instead of allowing themselves to settle into the morass of, oh, woe is me, I'm just sitting here in the hood and I'm never going to be anybody, they went out there and they pursued their dream. So that's what it's about, brothers. Figuring out what your talent is and pursuing it.
I've always been treated differently, because he's freakishly tall and amazing athlete, and so he's always been treated differently and has been insulated somewhat. Obviously, you can't be insulated fully from the pernicious effects of institutional racism, but he's been insulated somewhat from it. And the other thing is, it's interesting to me to say, and by the way, part of that is because part of the reason, you're taking it from the point of view, well, do we see them as anything other than commodities? No, not really. People have a use for you, and that's to watch you play basketball.
Every person in this society is viewed as a commodity. Stop looking to get some type of emotional succor or emotional support from anyone other than your immediate family members. It's not realistic.
But in another way, that's actually humanizing. Because the same reason that Turturro's character could relate to Eddie Murphy or Magic Johnson or Prince was because he was dealing with them, yes, as idols on the one hand, but also as more than a negative racial stereotype, as a person. He could relate to them more as people because he was familiar with their work or their art.
Well, I don't believe that it humanized them. I believe that it deified them. I think that there's a big difference. I think that you get humanized when somebody knows you personally. Right? What the Caucasian does with successful blacks is that they deify them. Right? Just like all the ancient gods, like in ancient Rome or ancient Greece, they worship so-called black gods. Most of the statues of the gods that they have today, that they show from ancient Rome or ancient Greece, some of them are fictitious. Now, they also created Caucasian versions of those gods in the ancient world. They did do that, but they also sometimes just outright worshiped so-called black versions, the original versions of those gods. Because all the gods of ancient Greece and Rome came from Kemet and Babylon. Okay? So point being is this: the modern day gods are celebrities, whether they be in the sports world or the entertainment industry, and they get deified. They don't get humanized. When the Caucasian looks at great black athletes or entertainers, Michael Jordan, Eddie Murphy, whoever you want to call them, whoever you want to name, they deify them. They don't humanize them. They don't fool themselves into believing that they know these people. They look at them as, wow, what a gift. They're like a god to me now.
And in that way, sports and Kevin Durant's position can have a very good societal effect because he's in a position where he can get people to relate to him differently than just a stereotype. And that's a good thing. And finally, this journey that they take as players, that a lot of players take, black and white, by the way, they come out of college or high school or 1 year of college in Kevin Durant's case, right? And they're kids. They don't know. They don't understand the world yet. Who does? He's almost 30 years old. KD has spent like almost a decade in the league, and he's a mature adult compared to the guy who came in. And he's offering a perspective on things as a much more mature person.
Well, I would say that he's more mature. I wouldn't say that he's mature. I think that there are degrees of quote unquote maturity. Really, all maturity is the outcome of experience. Right? You have to accrue a certain amount of experience to improve on your maturity, because you learn through your experiences. Now, hopefully, you won't put yourself through such a bad experience that you can't come back from it. There are people like that. But, like they say, whatever doesn't kill you make you stronger.
The guy who first broke into the league, and I find that interesting.
Well, I find it interesting, but I also find it as a reason to applaud him because Kevin Durant has never been in trouble. Kevin Durant has never been somebody that acted the fool. The biggest crime that he's committed basically is, going off on the media, myself included, along with others, because he's perturbed at something we've said. That's about it.
Well, look, I would not call that an infraction. I think that sometimes they need to go off on you guys, because you guys try to make yourself part of the story as opposed to just reporting the information. Modern day sports media, modern day media period, is about trolling. You guys do a lot of trolling on these athletes. All right. Really, social media and these different social media platforms are just about trolling people. Society at large is really just about trolling people and trying to piss them off. And then when you get them pissed off, now you have to deal with the ramifications of your actions. And then everybody tries to act like they don't know what happened. So that's really what pisses most of these athletes off. Is their view that you don't report the information, that you want to try to inject your own personal view in order to get views and clicks and relevance and things of that nature. So they hold you to a higher standard, Stephen A. Smith, because you're supposed to be a professional journalist. You're not somebody just giving your view or your perspective like myself or somebody else. So they do hold you to a higher standard.
LeBron James, the decision in terms of announcing he's going to Miami, that's the worst thing he's done in his career that we know of. And the fact of the matter is, when you consider the bubble that the modern day professional black athlete in the NBA has to live in or under, and the fact that they're such model citizens, there's nothing but applause that you can give to them. In the case of Kevin Durant, obviously we've been fortunate and blessed enough to have his mom on the show, who's as wonderful as they come.
His mom, aka his God, because he has put her on a pedestal. That is his quote unquote idol. And the mom worship cult is very, very prevalent in America. The mother goddess cult. It's very, very big. For those of you brothers, most of you brothers know this already, but that's why they tend to extol the single mother, because the single mother is the physical manifestation of the mother goddess. I've touched on this before. When you look up any depictions of the mother goddess, she's always depicted in the ancient world as a statue of a woman holding her baby by herself. Okay? So that resonates down to today.
And so you know where he gets his upbringing from. Gloria James is an absolutely wonderful woman. She's a very, very sweet lady.
Oh, absolutely. Many of LeBron's teammates will tell you that she's sweet as hell.
Always been sweet to me. But there's so many people. Dwayne Wade's mother is just, oh my Lord, she's just great. You see these individuals and you see where they come from. And it's a beautiful thing to look at their conscience and where it's at. And we applaud it. But in the same breath, it's important for them to understand that what they see for themselves, you do transcend to a point, or you're supposed to transcend to a point where you see the plight of others as well. And I know they see the plight of the African American community as a whole, but it's not just the impoverished, the desolate, the disenfranchised. It's also people in positions like myself and even the Mike Wilbons and all the other aforementioned individuals in this industry and beyond who have quote unquote made it, but still are subjected to the kind of things that they lamented that they're not subjected to. Like, I go through things that LeBron will not go through, or Kevin Durant will not go through. I'm just saying, sitting in my position, the level of scrutiny that I have to do with corporate America, you know, all of the stuff that comes with it.
Steve, stop, brother, please. I'm not saying that you don't go through scrutiny, but to compare yourself to LeBron James, just stop. Because then it goes into something that a lot of so-called black people like to do, which is to compare who has it harder. All right, just stop. Remind me of that scene in Lethal Weapon 3 where Mel Gibson's character and Rene Russo's character, they start comparing bullet wounds. Like, let's just move forward. The main thing that so-called black people need to do, and those of us will do, who are meant to rise up to a certain level, is to remove the shackles of self-oppression, which is to remove the idolatry of the Caucasian, which is the theme that I started this video with. Stop worrying about what the Caucasian thinks about you. They're not relevant. When you understand that, then you will remove a lot of that mental angst that controls a lot of our people's minds. All right?
They don't have to concern themselves. There are layers that they have been blessed to be able to bypass that we still have to deal with. And sometimes there's an absence of sensitivity to the challenges that we face in doing our jobs every single day as conduits of information and imagery and all those other things. And it's not just...
I get it, Steve. But you know what? I'm going to wrap this video up because I pretty much made my point, and so has Steve. But anyway, brothers, just look to yourself for validation. All right? Peace.